Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the What I Value podcast, where we have discussions around health, wealth, and happiness. Today's guest for episode 11 is Kimberly Pearson, an advocate of the Carnivore Diet, a wellness coach, and a yogi. Today's episode focuses specifically on her interest in the Carnivore Diet and how it's benefited her health, how she's implemented it, and a few surrounding topics, but specifically around the Carnivore Diet. As always, I hope this episode can provide you some value. Maybe you can learn some insights and potentially implement some of the things you've learned into your lifestyle. So I hope you enjoy. Kimberly, thanks for joining me on the What I Value podcast. I'm really excited to kind of connect with you. You've got a personal brand that's closely affiliated with something I'm pretty interested in as of late. So could you give me a little background of, what your personal brand is, what you do professionally? I think they're all kind of tied together.
They are. They are. So as far as a little background, I am Carnivore Kimberly on Instagram. I have been following the carnivore diet for over 3 years now. I'd say about 95% strict. Most of my nutrition comes from beef, eggs, butter, and lately raw milk. And I do some coaching. I'm also a yoga teacher as well as a board certified wellness coach. And so I have launched my brand Choose Zero Coaching, where I focus a lot on you have the power to choose. You always have the power to choose. And at the end of the day, I want you to be able to choose zero coaching because you have chosen zero sugar, zero processed carbs, and zero seed oil. And that kind of is the foundation of the message that I'm trying to get out there.
Sure. So is your coaching that you're doing primarily diet or is it also movement based? I mean, you said you're a yoga instructor. Do you kind
Mhm.
of tie your coaching all together? Because I know holistic coaching is, becoming more and more trendy versus, the specific, hey, I'm a nutritionist or I'm a, PT, that kind of thing.
I find that the most success that I have had with my clients, where they have had the most success, is doing what works for them and letting the client lead where the coaching goes. So if they have an interest in yoga or an interest in CrossFit, or they're not ready for the movement portion yet and they really just want to drill down on the nutrition, that's where we focus our energy
Sure.
rather than trying to, get blood out of a turnip, so to speak, where you're trying to talk your client into something that they may not physically be ready yet or even emotionally ready yet. So you meet the client where they are, you let them set the pace, and you work on the sticky things, the obstacles that come up.
Okay. So let's take a step back, kind of
Mhm.
explain how you got into carnivore, because you said you've been doing that for 3 years. I, I-
Mhm.
I'm sure it's probably a core belief, with your coaching, right? You said seed oils is a big one. That's one of the things
Mhm.
that I think everybody in the there's this new age of wellness space, and seed oils are like the devil right now,
Yeah.
as apparently as kale. But
Yeah.
anyhow, so
For different reasons, but
sure,
yeah.
yeah. How did you get into the carnivore diet versus, there's veganism, there's vegetarian, there's pescatarianism, there's, paleo, keto, etc. How did you specifically get into carnivore?
So the way that I got into carnivore, I was a pretty high level athlete growing up. I went to college and played volleyball at Texas State. I ended up blowing out my knee. And when I went from super high activity level to almost sedentary, I ballooned in weight. And I ended up getting somewhere around like 260 pounds. I was a size 18 going into a size 20. And I was uncomfortable in my body, grossly uncomfortable. Everything hurt. It was a struggle to get out of bed in the morning. I hated myself. Um, it was like I would look at myself in the mirror and go, "How did I get here?" This, and I knew exactly how I got there. Eating, gallons of ice cream and ramen noodles on the standard American college diet at that time, and it wasn't until, let's see, that would have been 2006, 2007 that I reached my highest weight. And I would go to the doctor because my mother was very worried about this weight gain, and they tested my thyroid. They did everything. It came back perfect, of course, because the human body tries very hard to maintain that homeostasis. And so all of my blood work came back normal. Thyroid was fine. But it wasn't until I met a friend of mine who at the time was doing CrossFit in 2010, and she introduced me to the Primal Blueprint, Mark Sisson's Primal Blueprint at marksdailyapple.com. And that is really where my journey started into learning that a calorie is often more than just a calorie, and it depends on how your body reacts to those calories. So if you are eating a diet that is high in refined carbs, how is that affecting your hormones? How's that affecting your insulin? And how is that ultimately affecting your weight gain and your metabolic health? And as soon as I dropped sugar, refined carbs, and seed oils from my diet, the weight slowly started to peel off. And I think it was over the course of about 2 or 3 years, I lost 75 pounds.
Wow.
And yes, and that was big. Well, it was smaller,
Quite literally, right?
but yeah, you know what I mean. But it was a triumph for me because the women on my father's side of the family were all very large women, and type 1 and type 2 diabetes run in both sides of my family. And so I was dealing with, whenever I was at my highest, I was pre-diabetic because I could just tell by, my blood sugar and the way that I couldn't go 2 to 3 hours without eating. I'd get to some point, I would be hangry and I would just have to shove food in my face. And then it would kind of calm down a little bit, but then it would just ramp right back up. And after I lost that initial 75 pounds, life got a lot better. Wasn't perfect because I suddenly developed eczema and on my ankle, and it was awful. It was itching all the time. I had super thin nails. I was eating what Mark Sisson calls his big ass. I don't know if I can say that on your podcast, but
Sure.
his big ass
Anything goes.
salads. They're branded. I'm quoting. And just a ton of spinach, a ton of kale, massive amounts of vegetables, sweet potatoes, lean meats and everything. And so I did lose weight on that primal way of eating, but little nagging things like bloating after eating. I would have a salad and I would just look like I was about 5 months pregnant. I never could figure out why. And then I was reading, it was 2018, November 2018, the day before Thanksgiving of all days.
Good timing.
And it was perfect timing. I came across an article by Kevin Stock called The Dangers of a Plant-Based Diet. And I don't even know how I stumbled upon this article. It's just the magic of the internet, just puts things in front of you that apparently you need to read. And when I read about oxalates and glycoalkaloids and lectins and pectins and all of the different anti-nutrients and chemical warfare that plants use to defend themselves against things that would eat them, my life changed. And it was like in that moment, everything made sense. I cold turkey dropped everything out of my diet that was not meat based, and my eczema went away. My hair got thicker. I used to have like bald spots right here from pulling my hair back into
Sure.
ponytails. All of that has grown back in. Um, my eyelashes are thicker. And I lost an additional 15 pounds. And my gains in the gym have been huge. I have not noticed a drop at all, really, in endurance. To be fair, whenever I first started, I went through the carnivore flu, and there was about, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 weeks where, because I was doing CrossFit at the time, I had to take the weight off the bar just to finish the workout because I had zero strength as I was converting to like complete ketone, power, I guess if you want to call it that.
Yeah, exactly.
uh, I that was challenging, but I kept telling myself that it would be worth it in the end because I'd read countless stories of people who had had success doing this. And sure enough, one day it was like a light switch. And now I can go pretty much all day without eating. I do an OMAD, eating one meal a day. And I eat all of my calories in one meal. I eat all of my protein in one meal, and I feel fantastic.
That's good. You covered so much, and I know a lot of people
Yeah.
don't understand carnivore. So you mentioned OMAD, so one meal a day. You're eating all your calories in one meal. Are you doing any kind of snacking, any kind of additional intake outside of that, other than fluids and maybe electrolytes?
I never did and don't do electrolytes. I feel that it can be very useful for people who feel like they need them. Um, I just kind of powered through. I never did any of the element salts or anything. I've had them before. I feel like for me personally, it was too much sodium, but that's me. Um, but what was the original question?
Well, that was one. So you're doing one meal a day, no additional snacking or anything like
Right,
that. You're
right,
not
right.
doing
Um,
jerky or I don't know. I saw
no.
bacon on your recent Instagram. That would
Mhm.
I would be eating so much bacon if I was
It's
on
not
one meal
bad.
a day.
Not a bad life.
So it's truly down to one meal and then water throughout the day.
Yes. I used to drink coffee and then I quit that. And that was quite a process. But that is correct. I eat one meal a day. Sometimes I eat two meals. I'll have, some eggs in the morning if I'm just feeling hungry.
Sure.
And part of this journey has been learning to listen to my body and intuitive eating. If I'm hungry in the morning, I have some raw milk or I have some eggs and cheese or something. And then when I'm hungry in the evening, I have my ribeye and maybe less eggs or less bacon than I would have eaten. So I still eat roughly the same number of calories, either divided into two meals or mostly one meal.
Okay. You mentioned raw milk. I know it's a taboo subject in New Jersey because it's illegal in New Jersey. Um, I,
Goodness
I
gracious.
think the law is that it's technically illegal. But can you describe what raw milk is versus regular, just for anybody listening that doesn't know what raw milk is?
Sure. So the milk that you buy at the store, we can start describing, what people are very familiar with.
Sure.
Ultra pasteurized, homogenized, purified, same color, year round, all different brands. You pour it, it's this beautiful, pristine white color. Um, the difference is that is, from what I have read, it is a dead product versus raw milk, which is non-homogenized, which means if you let it sit long enough, the cream and the milk will separate and you'll have a cream line at the top. It has all of the bacteria. It has all of the enzymes that you need to digest milk. And more often than not, the milk that you buy in the store is A1 casein, which is the protein in milk, versus a raw milk, which is usually a Jersey or Guernsey cow, which is A2 casein. A2 casein is the same protein that's found in human breast milk. And so if you have someone who struggles with drinking conventional store-bought dairy, when they switch to either A2 goat's milk or A2 cow's milk, the digestibility is much easier. And so I found that back whenever I was primal, I would eat A1 dairy, sour cream, cheese, milk, ice cream, even, and I would get bubble gut, where immediately your gut just start like you think about taking a straw and blowing bubbles in a glass of milk. That's what was happening inside my
So you
stomach.
felt a churning, an active, something was going
Exactly.
on. Okay.
Something very bad was going
Okay.
on. And then as soon as I switched to the A2, and I'm very fortunate that I have a co-op down the street from me that gets A2 raw, non-homogenized, not pasteurized, beautiful yellow golden milk from a farm a couple of hours away, and they drive it in. You have to buy it beforehand, so it's quite a process to get it. It is very stringently regulated. That's probably more regulated than the milk you buy in the store. And regularly, these raw milk dairies are tested by the state, and they have to meet extremely rigorous guidelines for like bacteria parts per million. And if it's over, they have to dump the entire batch. So it's extremely well maintained.
Yeah, I think I know a lot of the advocates describe it because the benefits are from the protein differences, the digestibility differences, and the very paramount is the biological activity, right?
Mhm.
We don't
Yes,
consume generally anything that's biologically active. Kombucha has biologically active. Yogurt is kind of iffy depending on what kind of yogurt we're getting. So we're consuming a lot of dead stuff, and that's, I mean, I'm kind of in the same um, intellectual sphere as you, let's call it. The belief that our system is totally radically broken, um, and that there's a lot of things that are resources there to fix it. So you're preaching to a choir here, but I love the conversation. The fact that like bubble gut, like I think I'm lactose intolerant. I think I am. I take Lactaid when I consume milk products. I have no issues. I do eat Lactaid ice cream, like the Lactaid brand ice cream, no issues. If I do that with general like other dairy products, I'll have issues. Bubble gut kind of products, difficulty up top, and then later on. Um, but it's interesting that,
serious.
yeah, I don't need to get into it,
Yeah.
but like my friends who you consume raw dairy describe not having those issues, even if they came from a background of lactose intolerance, which is really
Right.
interesting.
Yes. On that point, real quick, my husband was told that he has a milk allergy. And I may be speaking out of turn, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people assume that because they can't drink conventional dairy that they are lactose intolerant, and they kind of self-diagnose in that way, when it may be more of a sensitivity to the A2. Because as soon as he started drinking the A2, no problems. So he went from experiencing pretty radical bubble gut with cheese, ice cream, the regular milk, and then switch to H2. It's delicious.
That's
He loves
fantastic. That's good to hear. I
it.
mean, I think,
Yeah.
getting rid of these preconceived notions, I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, where are seed oils coming from? But the point being is like preconceived notions of, oh, I don't cook with canola oil. I'm not cooking with these supposed seed oils. No, but you're getting them through your diet. Oh, did you have that like tasty treat from the bakery? Well, you got some seed
Yeah.
oils there. Um,
Yeah.
so, where do you find that a lot of people have, they're sneaking in the bad things, that they might think that they're, oh, I'm eating pretty healthy.
In everything. It's literally in everything.
See, that's such an,
Um,
I love how that's such a problem, right? But could you
yeah, and
give some examples, the typical everyday
yeah,
person?
yeah. You go get a low fat salad dressing. The first ingredient is canola oil or soy oil. Um, the you so one example, you didn't exactly ask this, but one example of a restaurant that doesn't use industrial seed oils is Buffalo Wild Wings. They actually fry all of their stuff in tallow, so just want to throw that out there.
It's good to know.
But I mean, cereal, dry cereal has soybean oil in it. Oatmeal doesn't, because it's literally just oats, but some of the instant oatmeals that you get, the
Yep.
flavorings and everything, the ingredients in the flavorings contains 2% or less than things like soybean oil. You mentioned treats from the bakery. Bread has soybean oil in it. uh I mean, it's like the things that have soybean oil or corn oil or corn derivative or rapeseed oil or safflower oil or sunflower oil or some kind of seed oil, it's such a large category of food that you can almost just say it probably has it in it. Even vegetables from the store, speaking of corn derivatives, are usually coated in a corn wax. So if you don't wash your vegetables or your fruit, like apples, in extremely hot water and literally melt that wax coating off of your apples, you're eating corn, which is extremely high in omega 6s. It's extremely inflammatory. It attacks your reproductive system. It spikes your insulin. And in those limited, tiny, minute qualities, I'm not sure, quantities, I'm not really sure that it would have that much of an effect. But I mean, think about the people who eat fruit every day. I mean, they're getting that little tiny drip of oil, corn, wheat, gluten, sugar, and all of its myriad different names. And it's just the gymnastics that these companies go through to market these healthy, alternative, processed foods, and they're so cheap. It's so easy to go buy Hamburger Helper that has all of these really not so healthy ingredients, but they put on there that it's sponsored by the American Heart Association, and you're going, but this has seed oils that directly cause inflammation to your arteries that cause heart attacks. Like, you look at the ingestion of seed oils from starting in like the 1970s or so, and the direction that heart disease has gone, and I mean, it's just up.
Right,
The
and that's
correlation.
independent of consumption of overall fats or cholesterols. Yep.
Yes. Yep. And butter consumption has gone down, but these seed oils have gone up, and so has heart disease. And it's
Right.
just heart disease, cancer, diabetes. I mean, you name it, we've got it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the anti-nutrients. You mentioned that at the beginning, how vegetables have anti-nutrients. People think of nutrients, they're good for you, the building blocks of your body, etc. What are anti-nutrients, and why, where can I find them?
So anti-nutrients are chemical compounds found in foods that prevent your body from, they can do a couple different things. One of the things is it prevents your body from being able to utilize another nutrient. So in the case of kale, you mentioned evil kale earlier. Kale is very high in oxalates. And so when you eat oxalates, two things happen. Oxalates bind to calcium, and that prevents your body from reusing your calcium in your calcium reuptake cycle, as well as break down into, forgive me, I may not be pronouncing this, but raphides or raphides, raphides. Oxalates break it down into these tiny little microscopic needles, and they get lodged in your kidneys, your thyroid, your
Breast tissue. Uh,
breast fibroids. That was the other one. And they
yep.
just found out that these will pass the blood-brain barrier and have been found in patients with dementia and Alzheimer's.
Right.
So if you're eating like I was, the big salads every day, and you're trying to do the right thing and eating all of your superfood vegetables, it may actually be hurting you in the long run. And I say this with a caveat that everyone's tolerance is different. Everyone's dietary needs are unique. So, I'm not a doctor. This is not dietary doctor advice. I kind of have to preface that, but it seems that in large doses, these anti-nutrients, the oxalates found in leafy greens, collard greens, mustard greens, spinach, kale, chard is another one, um, to photo photosynth I can't ever say this, photosensitizers in fruit is another one that makes your eyes very sensitive to light. It's also responsible, like they say in Brazil, if you're making a specific drink, that you're not supposed to squeeze the lime with your hands because it will stain your skin.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, yeah. Um, Glycoalkaloids found in potatoes. The the kid in, I think it was North by Northwest, who died in the Alaskan wilderness, and they did a documentary on him. He died from wild potato poisoning because there was nothing else to eat. And he found these wild potatoes, and oh, good potatoes, right? Like, I
I
go,
had thought he had died from, it was like mushroom consumption or something like that. Um, he was the kid that it was Into the Wild. I think was the book. I think I have it on
yes,
my shelf over
yes.
there.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and fact check me on that.
Sure.
But I want to say it was potato poisoning, wild potatoes. But I mean, it could have been mushrooms. But that furthers the point that I'm trying to make, is that 98% of plants on this planet are inedible. You can't go out and eat grass. You can't go out and pick the leaves off the tree and eat those. We didn't really get into large quantities of vegetable consumption until World War II. That was kind of a new thing for humanity, at least in the States. And you look at the disease. I hate to keep bringing it back to, because correlation is not necessarily causation, but I mean, you are what you eat.
Yeah, it's
So,
really it's I like to look at because we can correlate data, etc. And I think that it's really shocking to see those things. But you could get an intelligent person debating you, and they could say, "Oh, well, that was also correlative to obesity," and then that comes from a myriad of different sources. So now obesity and then heart disease. Well, if those two are correlative, then you can't. Now it's all muddy. But what you can do is you can say, "Well, I can induce using oxalate." In a study of this has been done before, induce kidney failure in mouse models. Cause the mice's kidneys to fail by injecting them with oxalates, kidney failure within a few days, and
yeah.
then they have to undo that damage. And you're describing, consuming big salads, things like that, and they were inducing kidney failure in somewhere of the territory of about, I think um, it was in the few gram territory of oxalates, which is sounds like a lot, right? A gram, your average supplement is about between 250 milligrams and half a gram of total material for everybody listening. So a little supplement pill is about that. So, a small handful of that extracted out of your kale or your spinach or whatever could cause human kidney failure, right? So they scaled the model for mice. They induced that. Breast tissue. They caused breast tissue in well, they caused um, breast tissue to become cancerous. That was in an in vitro model, not an in vivo model, but still. So it's really scary, right? You think, hey, I'm eating healthy,
Yeah.
and
And they
but you
are pushing the,
exactly. And do you have a thought, or have you thought about why they would want to push seed oils? Why would they would want to push you to eat green leafy things, etc.? And the big they is kind of scary. They
yeah.
being, let's say, the health boards. Why would you, as an individual private citizen who's created wellness coaching, go one way that's completely contrary to the standard thinking?
That's a multi-layered question
Sure.
right there. And I think that to fully answer it, we have to go back to the very start of kind of the fat causes heart disease argument. When President Eisenhower had his heart attack, and then Ansel Keys came in and did the 7 country study, and he kind of cherry picked his data, and he found that the countries that were eating the highest amount of fat were having higher incidence of heart attacks. That data was not whole when he delivered it. And subsequently, the American Heart Association was like, yes, totally. We need to, saturated fat, bad, causing heart attacks. And now here we are today with this, quite frankly, outdated data still dictating the policy of nutrition in this country. And you can use your eyeballs and look around that the calories in, calories out, eat less, move more, whole wheat, don't eat butter, eat margarine. It's not working. Like it's not working. And I really don't buy this thing that it's the patient's fault, because these companies are looking to make profits. They're not necessarily looking to create the most healthy products that they can. And so they are creating hyper palatable, sugar laden, chemical food, if you even want to call it food, that is literally designed to addict you. There are labs within companies with scientists and departments devoted to determining the best smoke flavor to add to their barbecue chicken fingers, that is most pleasing to the control groups. And then that's what they put out for people to eat. So it is designed to titillate all of your senses. The bliss point is the actual term that companies use for the perfect amount of fat, the perfect amount of flavor, the perfect amount of sodium to get the human brain addicted to these foods. And at the end of the day, to address the original question that you asked, it's the money. it's the money. And I also have a hunch that it's a little bit of pride maybe wrapped up, because imagine the chaos that would ensue if people suddenly learned that, oh my gosh, the entire medical system is based on a lie. And you look back through millennia of human evolution, we wouldn't be where we are today having this discussion if it weren't for essentially the Paleolithic carnivore diet.
Right.
We are perfectly designed to digest meat and animal food. Meat, when it goes in your body, you have a stomach acid of 1 to 2, a pH of 1 to 2. That's where it starts. The only creature on this planet that has a stomach acid more acidic than a human being is a vulture. So the meat goes in, it gets digested, it literally melts in your small intestine, the water is extracted from your colon, and out it goes. We are a monogastric species, and we are literally designed to eat meat. People talk about your digestive fire. We're kind of getting off topic, but people talk about your digestive fire. If you have a campfire and you throw a bunch of wet grass clippings on that fire, what's going to happen?
Well, it's gonna either get smaller or go out.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So by eating a bunch of vegetables, you are essentially killing your digestive system, because that's not, I mean, you can eat it and you'll live, but you won't thrive. You won't thrive on it. You'll be slower to heal. And this brings up another topic that you asked before, why didn't I go vegan? A fair question. I did a stint of vegetarianism. I've never been vegan, but I did vegetarianism for a while because I was like, oh, I want to eat cleaner. I want to eat less meat. I want to eat more salads. I felt awful. I could
Okay.
hardly think. I had body aches and pains. I was eating those big salads. It was just, it did not mesh well with my body. And so I went back and I added more meat in, and I started to feel better. I could think again. Um, and I just, knowing what I know now, it's easy for me to look back and go, oh, it's because I wasn't getting any nutrients from, the salads that I was eating, or the sandwiches that I was having, or the eggplant parmesan that I love to eat. And I wish it weren't that way. I wish that we could just live on plants, because the vegan argument of kindness to animals and you don't want anything to suffer, I'm here for that.
Well,
um
I know where you're going with that, and I wanna add to that part of the conversation. So one aspect of my question was, the why were people advocating for that? So there's a few advocate groups of advocation that I've heard. There's the, caring for the animals thing, and then that kind of breaks into a few different questions of, is each animal life independently just as valuable? So is a cow the same as an ant? Is the same as a mouse, etc. Um, and then their whole argument falls apart if you want to dig into that, because if you kill one cow, you feed an average person, if they're just eating meat, for almost a year, right?
yes,
Um,
yeah, it's a
you
lot of meat.
soybean fields just massacre thousands of
Yeah,
snakes and mice and rodents, and then insects just get absolutely decimated by the pesticides and the herbicides, etc. You get decimated by the pesticides and herbicides because of that wax you were describing. I
we
wanted to
haven't
touch
even
on that,
talked about we haven't even talked about
but
glyphosate.
well, yeah, and that has its own problems. But then the other side of that morality question is like that CO2 output. And there's a great book. I have yet to read it, but I have a general summary and understanding of it. It's called The Sacred Cow, and the sacred cow is describing. I don't know if you have you read that.
I have not.
Okay,
I have not,
it's
but I've looked at the emissions and everything on that.
okay. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's the other thing is, well, you're being kind to the environment by
Hmm.
eating these other things, these the soybean oils and stuff. You're getting the same nutrients. Let's pretend that we're dumb and don't understand how nutrients work. You're getting the same nutrients. You're getting the fats. You're getting the proteins, etc. Um, just disregarding that your body's not absorbing and utilizing it for your actual tissue. Um, but but you're saving the environment, so it's worth it. Versus that nasty cow that's farting up, the environment. Drive your Tesla, eat your soybean oils, and be happy. But what they don't consider is the fact that you're sacrificing your personal health. And from I'm not religious, but I come from the perspective of life is pretty sacred. in that weird non-religious sacred perspective. And so you're sacrificing your own health for this ephemeral the environment. So on both sides, at least from the broad brushstrokes, you're kind of their arguments fall apart. At least from my perspective, they can have a different value structure. They're different scales of justice, and it weighs out differently. What are your thoughts on kind of what I just went over?
So the cow fart emissions, because I've heard that argument several times. Cow fart emissions, scientifically, because that's the scientific name for them,
I was joking about that, but
accounts
yeah,
for like
they do actually
no,
describe it in
no,
the
no,
Green New
totally,
Deal.
totally.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. Methane
Yeah.
accounts for like 2% of the greenhouse gases, where if you look at the industrial production of seed oils, it's quite a bit bigger. Um, the argument of the intention. I think I saw a TED talk by Earthling Ed the other day where he talks about the difference between the intention of murdering a cow to eat it versus accidentally murdering thousands of mice and squirrels and foxes and bunnies and
Yeah.
worms and microbes and everything is different. And I'm going, how?
So I guess now you're going to have to advocate for his descriptor and to explain it to me. So is his argument that you're intentionally killing this cow or this chicken or this egg, which represents theoretically a life form,
Right.
or incidentally, like when you're driving in a car, you accidentally hit a chipmunk. It's not your fault. You didn't mean to. So is that a similar kind of argument that he's trying to make?
I believe yes, and I think that he actually uses the example of accidentally running over a dog with the car.
Okay.
That it wasn't intentional, and therefore you are somehow absolved of killing that animal. Um, I personally don't draw a distinction between a cow and a worm. A life is a life to me. Um, I obviously hold humans in a higher regard than an animal. Um, and on that note, you mentioned that you kind of touched on the aspect of self harm, because if you're not getting those nutrients, you're not doing yourself any favors, regardless of how much virtue signaling you want to do with the health aspect of it or
Sure.
the environmental, these emotional arguments that are made. And it's very emotional. I have a 50 something goats in my backyard, and if I lose one, it's a heavy day. It's a heavy day on the farm. So I am like right here with life and death. And there was a beautiful poem, I guess you could call it, where it says that death is a closer companion to me than life, because at any moment we could be gone.
Sure.
Whether it's a car accident or some catastrophic something, we're guaranteed no extra minutes on this planet. Getting into a little bit more of an esoteric type of thing, it's something that is very close and near and dear to me is yoga, and the idea of the tenets of yoga. One of those is ahimsa, and that is self, like do no harm. Ahimsa is do no harm. And for vegans who try so hard to do this and inflict no harm on other beings, which is a very worthy goal, they do harm to themselves. And there have been people who make pilgrimages, spiritual pilgrimages to India. They go vegan. And then when they find their guru takes one look at them and they go, get this person some meat and milk. And so you have these vegans who have an idea of what they think ahimsa is. And ultimately, they're doing more harm to themselves, which means that they can't be doing good, because you have to do good for yourself in order
Sure.
to put out good. So it's just harm upon harm upon harm, and it's a cycle that's really hard to break.
Right. The furthest extent, like I like to, I do a lot of debating, whether it be with my family members or with the various intellectual groups that I, political or diet or movement based. I work out with a bunch of different people and they all come from different backgrounds. But one of the things I do is I extend a point of logic out to the farthest extreme. And it's not, I know there's the argument of steel manning, straw manning, and that would be arguing that it's a straw man because you're taking it to the farthest end of the extreme. I actually think it's a useful tool in seeing where that goes, right? The idea that if you just, um, I'm not going to use an analogy because I don't want to use that one. Um, is if you say, well, okay, if I harm myself a little bit, it makes the environment a little bit better. But let's just extend it out to what the obvious conclusion is. Well, then just kill yourself. Kill yourself. You do no harm
Right.
to the environment. You're not a contributing factor to any greenhouse emissions after the point of death. So just kill yourself. And I don't like that because, again, I think that life is valuable. But I follow the same construct is that like a human life is tremendously valuable. Um, as long as you're doing something with it. Like I don't like the argument, every life is tremendously valuable. It is as long as it's acting out some kind of benefit to um, society at large.
Living.
But it
Mhm.
goes to that kind of. I don't want to construe that I'm like a religious person. I believe that there's value in like doing good to society or culture because I don't. I think it's more internal than that. But regardless, I think that that's the concern though, is with this health thing. When you're feeding yourself good food, you can get good output, whether that's personal output or for community or for society at large. I do want to ask. So you mentioned eczema and you mentioned doing blood panels when you were transitioning diets and things like that. Now that you're kind of stabilized with the 3 years of carnivore, have your blood panels stayed the same? I don't know if you've done those, and has your eczema cleared up?
Eczema's gone, 1,000% gone. Um, and my blood panels, honestly, with the exception of my glucose, my fasting glucose, which is lower now, it's in about the 70s and low 80s rather than the high 90s and 100s. Um, that is the only thing that has changed. Well, my triglycerides are much lower now. But anything having to do with blood sugar is like low. Like everything that you would expect to see um, someone that is considered, by the book healthy, I am on paper. Now, as soon as I start to tell the doctors what I'm doing, they freak out. And when you have to
Sure.
eat, what are you doing? You need to eat carbs. I'm like, can you explain why? And they're like, well, because that's what we learned in medical school. And I was like, oh, the 25 hours that you took of nutrition training in medical school. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right, but so your blood panels look good. So you're not consuming any honey or any kind of. I know. If I was to go down this road, I would follow more of the carnivore-ish model, which would include some fruit, large-bodied fruit. Things like papaya, things that don't have the different distance between the core seeds and the skin is the largest amount, because that way there's the most amount of tissue, least amount of plant defense chemicals, which you alluded to earlier. That's the approach I would have. But you don't do any of that.
No. And that I never begrudge someone from eating fruit. I feel that for certain people, fruit can have a tremendous impact, especially if you are doing bodybuilding. Fruit can help with that. I tend to personally shy away from it just for me because honey is still very high in salicylates, which is
Mhm.
another one of those anti-nutrients. It can trigger things like eczema. Asthma is another thing that salicylates can trigger. Psoriasis is also on that list. And when I was gaining weight, I realized very quickly that I have a tendency to binge eat if I'm not careful. And so if, as an adult coming into my adultness, I was that meme where it was like, oh, you mean I can go to the store, buy a whole cheesecake and eat it by myself and no one can say anything? Oh, okay, this is great until it wasn't. And I have to be super careful. And I have found even whenever I was doing the primal paleo way of eating, I would still be able to overeat buttery vegetables like sweet potatoes and butter. I mean, I can go to town on some sweet potatoes and butter. I can eat 3 sweet potatoes by myself. And I had to reel that in because I would have, 10-pound, 15-pound weight swings on primal. And I have found that on carnivore, I am much more satisfied with my food, that I don't, finish a meal and then feel like I need to come in here and have ice cream, or just a little something, or maybe some chocolate, or whatever it is that I would reach for after the meal because I wasn't fully satisfied. But it's really difficult to binge eat steak. Have you ever been to a churrascaria, one of the all-you-can-eat steak Brazilian
I
steakhouses?
went to one, but I ended up eating a lot of a mix of things. I had some steak and things like
Yeah.
that. But you're right. Yeah, it's very difficult. I still can manage to go down with about like one. I think the best I've done is like 1.5, 2 pounds of steak, and it's a
Okay.
lot of steak. But
Mhm.
that's a fixed amount of calories, right? And
Mhm.
I love the idea that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off of your thought.
Oh, by all means.
But with consumption of calories, I wanted to ask you, that 2 pounds of steak, let's say, you can go through that. It's delicious. It's great, but you do feel satisfied. That night, I think I didn't eat until 1 o'clock the next day. Um,
Yeah.
I wasn't hungry, and it wasn't because it was like, oh well, I feel bloated. It was just society or satiate. I was satiated. Um,
Yeah. Satiety.
Satiety, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was just not hungry, right? I don't even know if I had coffee that next morning. That's one thing that's going to be difficult if I do approach the carnivore diet, the coffee, caffeine thing. Um, I'm approaching it slowly, right? I'm reading the Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. That's why I'm approaching it from the carnivore-ish perspective. You have a completely different. You're more the Sean Baker approach. Um,
Fit.
Although he doesn't seem to advertise his consumption of eggs or anything like that. But he doesn't do
I,
any sugars.
Correct. I think that he is 100% red meat, almost like Michaela Peterson's Lion Diet, where it's just red meat and salt and water. I was going to say something and it left me. Oh, on the coffee, may I make a friendly suggestion
Sure.
on that, and let you know kind of my journey on quitting coffee, because I drank coffee habitually for over a decade. Um, I started by doing 3/4 caffeinated and 1/4 decaf. And then I would drink that for a while. And then I went to half and half. So I would do half calf, half decaf. And then I would do that for a while. And then I did 1/4 caffeinated, 3/4 decaf, and slowly weaned myself off, because I've done the cold turkey coffee quit before. Never in 1,000 years would I do that again. It was
Interesting.
awful.
I find I think caffeine for me is something I wouldn't wean myself off of. I would probably titrate up with caffeine supplements. Um, I know I know that coffee has a bunch of oxalates in it. That's one of the downsides of it. Um, there's also the caffeine element, uh, but I think caffeine is such a potent nootropic, and I like the performance benefits in terms of in the gym. And I won't get away from pre-workout. I would love to, but I know from the bodybuilding side of things. Again, the carnivore code kind of Paul Saladino approach. I'm going to need that sugar, but it's definitely interesting to hear your perspective. You know, I couldn't do no sugar. I think having that muscle fullness from glycogen, having that additional level of endurance energy that I don't believe I would have. I've done 24 or 36 hour fasts and they just end tragically, muscle spasms, etc. Um, yeah, it's not fun, but I think I've always approached it from the wrong perspective. Um,
Okay.
but that goes to my next question. I want to um, ask you. So you have a client coming in. You don't know they eat a standard diet. They come to you and they want to get better. And their health metrics are, I want to lose a little bit of weight. I'm not really concerned about weight too much. What is your kind of approach with them? Are you going to be asking them a ton of questions? What is your process as a wellness coach?
I'm going to ask him a ton of questions.
Okay,
That's where it
so I,
starts.
I eat standard American food. I'm trying to lose a tiny
Mhm.
bit of weight. What's the next step?
The next step is, what do you think? So you say the goal is weight loss, is what I'm hearing. What do you think has contributed the most to your weight gain? Would be a good place to start. And your answer would be insert
It would be
whatever.
overconsumption of this or that. But it's so you're describing it, it's a question process. Are you at the end of the day, are you advising them with a meal plan? Is it day-to-day coaching? Are you doing like let's get past now. We've done the consult. You've come to a conclusion. What's your advisement process? I want to like prospective listeners that are listening to this and are going to hear that, Kimberly Pearson could be my wellness coach. What does that mean to them?
So I would take your answer of overconsumption. And my next question is, what do you think is causing that overconsumption? And so my job as a coach is to help the client get to the root of what's stopping them from reaching their goals, whatever that goal is. It is not up to me to dictate to someone else what their macros should be or what their food plan should be. The style of coaching that I do, that I have seen have tremendous success, is people, you hold their hand through it, to be fair. And so if we're rocking and rolling, we get down to the root of what's causing your overconsumption, and it's stress. You're staying up way too late, and then you get munchies during the night. And then all of a sudden you come to me and you say, hey, I'm really struggling with sugar cravings. And then I would ask you, hey, how's your sleep? And you might say, oh, well, I've kind of been staying up really late on my phone. I'm going, okay, well, I've heard you say in the past that this is your goal. Do you think that what you're doing now is moving you towards or away from your goal? And then the obvious answer is, oh, well, what I'm doing is moving me away from my goal. And so then it's up to them to course correct, rather than me going, well, duh, dummy, you're on your phone late at night and your cortisol and all this stuff, because you can just drown someone in the science of why they shouldn't be doing something. And that is not going to get nearly the same results as if you help them arrive to the conclusion that they need to arrive at. Because no one is as much of an expert on you as you. So how can I come in? We have a 30-minute phone call, and then I'm suddenly supposed to be telling you what is about how you need to live your life and everything. I have been coached that way before, and it's I don't want to say it's a failure, because there are some people who do really well with that boot camp style of coaching, where this is what is, this is the plan, stick to it, and they have success on it. But is it lasting success? Or is it, I'm going to meet these goals for this amount a lot of time, and then whenever I lose 20 pounds, I'm going to go out and celebrate with Mexican food and margaritas. And then they
That could create a
right back
cascade.
in that cycle of, exactly. So I would help my client get to the root, the why. So you want to lose 20 pounds, why? And if you ask someone why enough, eventually you get down to the true nugget of why it is that they want to lose the 20 pounds or look good in a bikini, or and a lot of times it has to do with childhood trauma of bullying in school. And this instance, whenever I was in junior high, it just leveled my confidence, and I've never been able to really get it back. And so I want to feel confident. It's like, okay, well, if you had that confidence, how would your life be different? And then they start telling you, oh, well, I could do this and I could do that. And so all of these are things that you can draw on in the future if they fall off the path, to remind them that, hey, I remember you said that you really wanted to feel confident for insert whatever reason here. Is what you're doing aligning with what you said that you wanted? And then they have to kind of check and balance themselves. And so it's a really interesting dance that you go through with clients.
So you're building out some of that in that first 30 minutes, and then are you doing weekly? I know I have some fitness coaches that don't do weekly check-ins. They do bi-weekly check-ins because they're powerlifting clients. How do you structure your follow-up visits? Because obviously 30 minutes is not nearly enough to get, I mean, we're having over a 30-minute conversation right now just to kind of
Right.
shoot the shit I mean, you essentially. But what do the follow-ups look like? And, I mean, how many clients are you dealing with? Are you looking to onboard more clients, etc.?
So right now I do have space to take a couple more clients. I do typically about 6 at a time. And I will arrange it so that we do a once a week check-in, because I feel it's very important to kind of get that like Thursday, how has your week been? What do we have coming up on the weekend? Let's come up with some plans together to maximize the success so that we don't, like I used to do, eat like an unsupervised child over the weekend. Done it. And then it's really as long as it needs to be, usually about 45 minutes or so. I find that we can really drill down and get to some of the issues that we're having. And then just kind of daily as needed on Instagram or text messages. If you're having a bad day, send me a text. Let's work through it. Let's maybe have an extra phone call. I'm right now, I am more concerned with helping people than I am, being like the Jillian Michaels of carnivore right now.
Sure.
I just want to get this message out because I feel like so many people can benefit. And if someone doesn't want to go full blown carnivore, they don't have to. Like I said, you're the expert on you. So if you think that you need carbs to further your bodybuilding aspirations, I'm here for it. How can I help you do that? It's awesome.
No, I can hear the passion in your voice, and you seem to have like a plan, right? You're not saying hey, I could onboard 20 clients, right? You have 6 more slots or something like that, or you have an ongoing 6 clients. That's a good model, right?
Rotating, yeah. And my goal is eventually to graduate my clients so that they can choose zero coaching, and that's why I chose that name, that coaching name, because I don't want to have a client in perpetuity forever. Because if I have that, that means that I have failed at coaching this person to autonomy, and that's what I want to do. Is I want to get everyone to the stage where they can make informed decisions about the food that they choose to or not eat and move on with their lives and experience effortless health and wellness and get on track and stay on track and be able to get back on track when they fall off, because guilty as charged, I've done it too.
So your goal is to get them off of coaching. That you want a client that graduates from your program and from your coaching protocol. Fantastic. Well, if a potential client, how do I contact you?
You can contact me at believe@choosezerocoaching.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Carnivore Kimberly, and I'm here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having this conversation. I'll definitely DM you about anything that we discussed. I'm going to share this through the Spotify, the YouTube, etc. It was really great having you on, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Likewise, this was a great conversation. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this episode of the What I Value podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a like, give it a rating on the various podcast platforms you listen on, and if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, as it really helps kind of give me some feedback as to what you guys like and what you guys don't like. So once again, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.